With Senna hitting the live servers, we finally got all the stories surrounding Senna, Lucian and Thresh. So we are finally able to put together the entire story arc. And because you've been waiting for this for quite a while, let's have a look at the complete story of Lucian, Senna and Thresh. This entire multi-layered story begins on the Blessed Isles. Of course, the story of this place remains unchanged. In the year 25 before Noxus, which I'm sure everyone knows because we had a look at the timeline last time, there was a king in an unnamed kingdom whose queen was poisoned by an assassin. Because nobody in the kingdom was able to help the queen, the king sent his loyal follower and a personal guard, Callista, into the world to find a cure. And while she was gone, the king appointed his general, Hecarim, as his new personal guard. After a while, Callista found out that the only place where people could help the queen were the hidden Blessed Isles. The issue was that the monks of the Blessed Isles told Callista that the queen was pretty much dead already, and that they can only help the living, so there was no point even bringing her here. Because of that, they asked Callista to not share the secrets of the Blessed Isles with anyone. But after Callista was pressured, she shared the secrets of the Blessed Isles with the king, while Hecarim was watching. And so, the king brought his already rotting wife to the Blessed Isles, where the monks told the king the exact same thing they told Callista. The queen was dead, and they couldn't help her. But the king didn't believe them, and he ordered Hecarim's knights to slaughter everyone, including Callista. You can see how mad the king got from sharing a room with a rotting corpse for months. In the end, one of the monks gave up, and he showed the king the Waters of Life, where they successfully resurrected the queen. By which I mean the queen stayed as a rotting corpse, only now she was a living rotting corpse. This image was the last straw of the king's already fragile mind, and after he realized what he had done, he cast a spell that would kill him and the queen, so that at least they could be together in the afterlife. The problem is that the Blessed Isles were a land filled with magic, and so when the king cast the spell, the lands amplified it, and the result was an explosion that spread the gift of the undeath. And this is where the real villain of this story comes in, because Thresh was a sorcerer from the Blessed Isles. You can even see what he looked like as a human in Realms of Runeterra. Thresh was a warden of an order dedicated to gathering and protecting arcane knowledge. This was one of the reasons why the Blessed Isles were surrounded by protective pale mist. Because Thresh worked for the order for many years, and because he was highly methodical, his master sent him to protect the most sacred collection of dangerous artifacts beneath Helya, the capital city of the Blessed Isles. But even though Thresh was well suited for such work, his brethren knew about his passion for cruelty. In fact, the reason why Thresh was sent into the deepest vaults of Helya was because there he would be safely separated from others. But on top of that, Thresh would never be able to get the recognition he thought he deserved. Over the years spent in darkness, Thresh turned bitter and jealous as he patrolled the empty halls with his lantern staff. His mental health became worse and worse, until the armies of the Ruined King arrived on the Blessed Isles. Secretly, Thresh delighted in the slaughter that followed, and in fact, the monk who led the king to the fabled Waters of Life was none other than Thresh himself. He did it to see the guardians of that sacred place slaughtered, and to hopefully get the recognition he desired. After that, the king transformed the lands with his foul magic, turned the protective pale mist into the predatory black mist, and as a side effect, he created one of the cruelest beings of Runeterra. The villain of this story, the Chain Warden Thresh. Ever since that day, the lantern staff that was Thresh's only companion was twisted into his own portable prison where he could store the tormented souls. None had ever escaped that prison. None but a single soul. Which brings us to the protagonists of this story. Ever since he was a boy, Lucian wanted to be just like his father, Urias, a member of the Sentinels of Light, protecting the living from the Black Mist. But Urias didn't want his son to follow his footsteps. He was hoping Lucian would choose a less dangerous life, so he could keep their family safe. As a result, even though Lucian waited for the day he would become his father's apprentice, that day never came. And as Urias traveled the world, Lucian stayed home in Demacia. And with more and more time spent in Demacia, Lucian realized how much he disliked their culture. Demacia could only recognize the good or evil, and they would exile peaceful mages to the hinterlands. Lucian saw that in reality these mages were just people that needed help, and Lucian found fulfillment in safeguarding these banished mages on their dangerous journey out. After he returned home from one such journey, he found a stranger waiting at his door. She introduced herself as Senna, a Sentinel of Light. With Urias' relic weapon in her hands, she told Lucian his father died in a battle against the Black Mist. From this point on, the stories of Lucian and Senna combine. But before we continue, we need to know how Senna got to this point. Senna first encountered the mist at an early age. One day, a wreckage from a distant harrowing washed up on her home island, which is an unknown place to us. And the black mist within the wreckage awakened upon contact with life. Senna and her village survived the following storm of souls, thanks to the intervention of a nearby sentinel. But even after the storm was repelled, the mist was still mysteriously drawn to Senna. And in time, they realized that Senna was cursed, and the horrors of the mist pursued her endlessly. She could never know when it would strike next. But what's worse, when it didn't come at all, Senna would become paranoid. The sentinel who saved Senna was none other than Urias. Even he didn't understand why Senna was cursed. She was just an ordinary girl after all. But he knew that if she was to survive, she had to learn how to fight back. And so Senna joined Urias in the Sentinels of Light, a sacred order that could be traced back to the Blessed Isles. Over time, she learned how to use the relic stone pistol Urias gave her. But even as Senna grew comfortable working with Urias, she learned to keep everyone else distant from her, because should the mist come again, she would only be hurt more as her friends got devoured. What's worse, Senna could never stay in one place for long. She and Urias learned this the hard way, after people offered them shelter, only to find themselves trapped by the black mist. In the end, even Urias couldn't fight the mist forever, and after he died as well, Senna wasn't sure if she could ever let anyone get close again. Still, Senna sought out Urias' family in Demacia to tell them of his fate. There she met his son, Lucian, which brings us to the point at which the stories combine. After Senna explained what happened, Lucian realized that the woman in front of him had the life he always desired. While he stayed in Demacia, she traveled with Urias around the world, fighting the darkness. As Senna made to take her leave, Lucian stopped her, insisting to join her, and Senna reluctantly allowed him to accompany her. This meant that they had to travel to Urias' birthplace together, which was far away from the Massian lands. There they held the Vigil for Lost Sentinels, which was a funeral ceremony for the Sentinels of Light. When the ceremony was over, the black mist arrived again. This was the first time Lucian saw it, and he was horrified. On the other side, Senna drew her weapons with a grim familiarity. This was her curse. During the following fight, one of the wraiths managed to claw Urias' pistol from her grip, and Lucian managed to retrieve it. Moments later, with a sense of fate opening before him, the sorrow in Lucian's heart manifested in a bolt of light that fired from the pistol, distracting the wraith so Senna could banish it and fight off the remaining spirits. This was the moment Lucian showed Senna his potential to join the Order, because the Sentinel's relic weapon didn't have a trigger. They could only be fired by pure heart, and Senna had never seen anyone without a training fire it before. Eventually, Senna gave Lucian his father's pistol and taught him the ways of the Sentinels. And as she did so, even though Senna didn't think she would allow anyone to get close to her, a bond slowly formed between them. This part was explained further in one of Lucian's memories in the story Hunter of Shadows. Together the two fought uncountable horrors originating from the Shadow Isles, and their reliance on each other blossomed into love. The closer Lucian grew to Senna, the more he witnessed her curse, and soon his urge to heal Senna became a crusade he pursued with reckless zeal. While they were researching a cure for the curse, they delved into a forgotten vault, rumored to hold the secrets of the Black Mist. And sure enough, besides secrets, that's where they met the sadistic wraith Thresh. Senna realized how powerful Thresh was, and she called for retreat. But they were so close to finding a cure that Lucian couldn't just back away, and so, recklessly, he fought Thresh head-on. Unfortunately, as Senna predicted, Thresh gained the upper hand, and Senna was forced to step between Thresh and Lucian in order to save him. And as the scythe separated her soul from her body, she screamed at Lucian to run away. After this encounter, the story of Lucian and Senna separates again. The following years, Lucian roamed around Runeterra as a husk of the man he once was, his former charm replaced with anger and bitterness. He now wielded both his and Senna's pistol, which he used to hunt Thresh, in hopes of destroying the lantern and granting oblivion to his lost love. Honestly, Thresh couldn't care less about Lucian and Senna. To him, they were just another couple of souls he could toy with, but he enjoyed watching Lucian torment himself. Thresh didn't even need to do anything. Lucian tortured himself as he couldn't let go of the past. During these times, when Lucian was hunting Thresh, is when most of Lucian's stories happened. He knew Thresh traveled with the Black Mist, and so he tried to track it down and predict where the Black Mist would appear next. One of his earlier encounters with Thresh happened during the Shadow and Fortune story, where Lucian traveled to Bilgewater to fight back the Black Mist during the Harrowing. When he encountered Thresh here, he felt Senna's presence within the lantern, which made him realize that Thresh kept tormenting her, but it also gave him hope that he might be able to redeem her. Either way, at the end of that story, together with Miss Fortune and Illaoi, they just pushed back the mist, and Thresh escaped. But then we got the story that appeared right before Senna was announced, called Homebound. This is quite a lengthy story that continued Lucian's pursuit. Here we learned that as Lucian kept tracking down the Black Mist, he traveled from Bilgewater to the city of Rykon in Ionia, to the southernmost Ionian island Sudaro, and he ended up on an island in the Serpentine Delta, which is a group of islands belonging to the Ishtal region. This is where the Homebound story takes place. As he helped the locals deal with the Black Mist, he fought numerous corrupted souls, including Thresh himself. This gave him a chance to test out his newest weapon crafted in Bilgewater. It was a clay grenade filled with silver dust. When it exploded in the middle of the Black Mist, it created a clear circle as the mist avoided it, revealing Thresh in the middle. This encounter was special because for the first time in years, Senna was able to communicate with Lucian again. She swirled around the surface of the lantern, signaling Lucian to shoot directly at her. And as he did, the lantern got damaged, proving that it could be broken. After this, Thresh simply escaped. And in the second half of the story, Lucian helped the locals take care of their dead. The locals were divided into two halves. The common folk simply buried the dead, but the other half, called the Naktu, worshipped fire, and they burned the dead, leaving nothing behind. As they said, not even the souls. This kept the islanders at a little bit of a civil war. The Naktu burned the dead to make sure the Black Mist wouldn't resurrect them, so sometimes they even burned the bodies of the non-believers, which the common people didn't like. Anyway, while Lucian was helping them, he met Mira, a woman who wanted to find her lost father. And with Lucian's help, she did find his dead body. This adventure made Lucian reflect on his past. Just like Mira, he too was chasing someone he had lost. But even though Thresh told Lucian that Senna's biggest fear is that they will be tormented forever together, Lucian realized that through all the years, it was just one failed attempt to free her after another. What's worse, Senna knew that Lucian was following Thresh and torturing himself in the process. He had promised to bring her peace, but all he had done was add to her misery. He'd been failing her since the day she died. In that moment, Lucian decided to end it all. Instead of being tormented alone, they would be together, one way or another. With that, Lucian hopped onto his boat, and he set sails to Helia of the Shadow Isles. Now, while this was happening, Senna's story continued inside the lantern. She explored her spectral prison, and she learned that life was the origin of her curse. Life shone brighter within her than anyone else. She had been infected with it when she first encountered the wreckage that brought the Harrowing. There she had been touched by a powerful lingering soul, given its unnatural life. It was life that the Black Mist could never let go. And since the mist favored Senna's life essence over others, she realized she could force the mist to attach to her, while freeing the souls around her. Among these freed souls were sentinels who possessed lost knowledge of the ruination, of her curse, and the love that created it. Meanwhile, Lucian arrived at the Shadow Isles, and as it was depicted in the Rise cinematic, he fought through the hordes of lost souls before he got to Thresh. And as many of you already know, the Rise cinematic was directly continued by Senna's reveal. Lucian thought this would be his last battle. He was ready to die to ensure the prisoners of the Lantern would be at peace. But in the end, as Lucian drove his broken pistol into the Lantern, not only did he finally silence the lesser souls and gave them rest, but Senna, who was empowered by light, escaped the prison back into the world, with a cannon made out of the relic stones of the weapons of the lost sentinels. She was dead, but also alive. And with the knowledge of the previous sentinels, she told Lucian what she learned. She told him of their new mission. They had to find the ruined king and stop him at any cost. And this takes us to the latest point of the story arc, the story called The Voices of the Dead. Lucian and Senna arrived in Ionia. The Black Mist was active in this area, which is why they were called here by another sentinel. Lucian pushed forward on foot, while Senna flew ahead to push away the mist with her giant cannon. The sentinel who called them here, the one they were looking for now, was called Annabelle. But after a while, Senna found a girl called Daowan inside the Storm of Souls. The girl was standing above the dead body of Annabelle, her mentor, and she was holding his relic stone glaive to protect herself. Senna saw that the black mist was creeping towards the nearby catacombs. Whatever it was seeking was inside. And so Senna and Daowan hurried in the same direction. They kept going deeper and deeper underground, until they awakened agonized wraiths throughout the catacombs. Senna could just fight them back, but she learned the better option was to embrace them before death could. Her call was irresistible, and she drew the mist to herself and away from others. As the mist filled her, one by one it let the other souls go. But in the process, it also transformed Senna into a wraith. When the catacombs were clear and the spirits freed, Senna poured the mist into her cannon and fired it back at its host. When everything got quiet again, Senna realized that Daowan held her glaive pointed at her the entire time. With that, Lucian finally arrived as well, asking what he had missed. To which Senna replied the usual. The ruined king was raiding catacombs to find who knows what. And that is the complete story of Lucian, Senna and Thresh. It is cool to see that not only did Riot manage to close a story, by which I mean that Lucian succeeded, he freed his love, but it also opened up a new story arc. Because he freed his love, they learned that the mist is influenced by the ruined king, and suddenly, the ruined king is our newest villain. With that said, we all know Riot. So come the 20th anniversary, we should be expecting the announcement cinematic for the latest champion, the ruined king. Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other league facts and stories? And did you know that we have need mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.